Hey guys, Timothy Roberts here. In this video, we're not talking about cymbals, we're talking about drums, and specifically we're talking about a vintage drum restoration that we just completed here at Reverie based on this drum right here. So let's talk about it. So back about a year ago, I got my hands on some vintage field drums, and they're meant to be snare drums. They're meant to be slung over the shoulder and played, and got some 14s, some 15s, even some 16s. And I took one of them and I converted it to a kick drum. It's this one right here. It's a Ludwig & Ludwig from the badge. I'm not a historian when it comes to vintage drums, so if you are, please drop a comment below. Tell me what you know about these drums. But this is a mahogany shell drum. It had this beautiful weathering to the shell and to the hoops. And someone over the years had like painted over the single tension lugs here. And I thought it was cool, so I didn't strip the paint, I just left it. It kind of makes it a little bit weird as far as like being able to tune it and whatnot. But basically we put it together kind of thinking, okay, we'll see how this turns out. And it turned out stunningly well. This drum has been used on tons of gigs. I've played it on a couple recordings, and I love to take it as like a part of my small kit. I use it on a lot of jazz gigs, and it has this really growly, thumpy, kind of weird, funky sort of sound. And I posted about it a couple times. I've taken it to some trade shows. People have played it, given me feedback on it, and people really dug it. But recently I had someone reach out and say, hey, can you make something like this, but make it with double-ended lugs so I could tune both heads? Because the single tension basically has these knobs here, and you turn that and it's tensioning both heads at the same time. So this drum is fairly limited in the tuning range that it has and the ability to get different sounds. It kind of does one sound really well. But beyond that, it's not a super versatile drum. So the idea was this drum, a version of it that's a little bit more versatile, could do different sounds, different tuning ranges, all of that. So I had plenty of other vintage shells to choose from, and I landed on this drum here. You can't see the side, but you will in a second. And I think it turned out incredible, so let's check it out. All right, so let's talk the specs on these things. We have, as far as shell thicknesses go, vintage shells are very thin typically, and usually they have reinforcement rings. So the original drum does have reinforcement rings on the top and bottom, nothing in the center. It's thin mahogany, probably a poplar shell on the inner, possibly something different. But yeah, super thin shell. These are the original wood hoops as well. And when I put the thing together, I put an Evans calf tone on the front and a G12 on the batter side. There's a little moleskin thing there. And what I did was I created this little riser situation using a segment of a shell, a piece of metal, and then a Gibraltar universal hoop clamp. That just lifts up the drum ever so slightly, so it's a little bit more, what's the word? You can basically, the beater is going to hit in a better spot on the drum. With these kinds of 15-inch drums and 16-inch drums, you're going to be hitting the beater's going to hit right up near the Evans logo or whatever logo of the head you have. It's hitting higher. Not a lot of people, some people would say that's not a good thing, but if you think about hitting a beater in the center of a bass drum, you're going to get the driest, deadest sound. So if you want something that's a little bit more open and funky, you do actually want it to hit higher up on the drum or lower on the drum depending on the size. So with this, it's hitting up higher. That's giving it all that growl and those overtones. And instead of drilling in actual mounting hardware for the legs, I just have the universal hoop clamp clipped to the hoop. That's just what I did for this original drum. For the new drum, what we did was we actually drilled in hardware on the sides. We replaced the hoops because the hoops were on the original drum were pretty rough, very out of round. The shell was in great shape though, and we added these aluminum lugs, super lightweight, and we added our Reverie badge there right below the original Ludwig and Ludwig badge. I believe these are from the 60s, but if I'm wrong, please correct me in the comments below. This shell is clearly some kind of, I think, mahogany on the outside. The inside, though, is, or sorry, maple on the outside. The inside is mahogany, though, I believe. So it's got like a ply of mahogany, it's got a ply of maple on the outside, and new hoops, new hardware for the lugs and the bass drum spurs. And then we did the same thing with this little mini riser. It basically lifts the drum up to be essentially like a 16-inch as far as where you end up hitting. So the beater is kind of hitting up here near, below the Evans. And yeah, I could have put a bass drum height hoop on this that could have clamped right to the bass drum, but then the beater would have been even higher. So this drum has reinforcement rings, but it also has a reinforcement ring running down the center of the shell. It's got one here, and then a thin piece of wood here to reinforce where the lugs go in. And it's very thin. This shell is very thin. This whole drum is super, super lightweight, which is going to give it a really nice low tone naturally, which means you can get away with smaller sizes. So that's something I really love about these smaller drums with thin shells, is you get deeper tones out of them. You don't need to go with like a 22-inch size necessarily to get a big sound. You can compensate by thinning the shell or having a shell that's thinner, not thinning the shell in terms of a manufacturing process, but sourcing a thinner shell, which drops the pitch low. And so even just right here, what we can do, I'll show you this. Let me readjust the camera and I'll show you just in real time, tuning it a little bit and getting a deeper sound. All right, so let's connect our kick drum. That's the sound we got going on. I'm going to start with that resonant side because that can give us a growl. I usually like to think of kick drums as you get the tone from the front head and the feel from the batter head. So you want enough resistance there. You don't want the batter side super floppy because then you get, it just is harder to play. So you want to adjust the feel on the front head, tone on the resonant head. So let's see what this sounds like. And right then and there we have that growly tone. Woo! Let's just drop these two lugs up top, see what happens. A little bit lower, a little bit more growly. Bow, bow. Some of that is killer, honestly. Because you can think maybe that's ugly. Maybe you think, oh, that's an ugly tone. But imagine you're in a room, you got your band there, all the musicians are together. It's a live environment. That growl, the ugly part of that growl is going to get kind of lost. And what's going to be left is just vibe. So let's go back up here. Little growly. Now let's take this resonant head up and see what kind of bop sound we can get. Pretty cool. Let's just go all the way. I'm going to adjust this batter head to be higher so it's going to feel a little bit responsive, and it's not going to be something where you can dig the beater in. You're going to have to play off the head. But pretty soon, you know, there we're getting to that kind of pingy bop jazz bass drum sound. I'm not doing any fine tuning. I'm just cranking the lugs a little bit at a time. I probably wouldn't go that high with it. I would keep it a little bit lower if I wanted a bop sound, but so let's drop it back down. You know, this batter head has gotten a little bit out of range in terms of what would feel nice to play. It's going to be a little bit too springy. So that feels a little better. It's springy still, but it's not like throwing the beater back at me super, super hard, which would be kind of harder to control. So I'm going to drop it back a little bit more. Yeah, that. Now that feel is nice. Obviously I'm playing it with my hand, not my foot, but I can kind of tell that's where it wants to be as far as how much rebound I'm getting. So yeah, killer drum. Super stoked about how this turned out. So let's listen to me playing them both back to back on the kit. I'll have the tuning from the kind of the original thing where I just kind of put the heads on, sort of tune them, didn't really pay much attention, and then just started playing it and was like, this is killer. So let's listen to that, and you guys can let me know which is your favorite. Yeah, so it's super fun. It's got, yeah, this beautiful mix of growly, funky, but controlled, contained. I've got it tuned kind of medium right now. Obviously the other drum is kind of in the one place that it likes to be. I can crank it up a little bit, but it ends up sounding a little, yeah, weird. Not in a good way weird, just kind of weird. So I usually keep that one tuned a little bit lower like that, a little bit more growly like that. But this one has the ability to do all of it. So I can drop the tuning on this, get more of that growl, and then I can also crank it up and get more of that like bop, really pingy high sort of sound on the kick drum. So yeah, this has been a crazy cool project. I'm probably gonna do more because I have a bunch of vintage shells sitting over in my drum side of the Reverie shop. But I would love to know what you guys think of these sounds. So please drop a comment below and let me know, is this the kind of kick drum you would love to play? 15 inch is not a common size, but I have personally found it to be incredibly useful on the gig. And who knows, maybe we'll start offering a 15-inch kick drum spec to this kind of sound. Maybe we'll use vintage shells, maybe we'll use new shells. We use Nordic out of Minneapolis. They make incredible shells. So we can make them new, we can make them from some old stuff. So reach out if you're interested in commissioning one of these drums. But otherwise, let me know what you think. Drop a comment below. Hit the like and the subscribe if you haven't, and the bell if you want notifications. Keep an eye out for the next video. I'm Timothy Roberts. Thanks for watching.